Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I want to answer a question that I got from a student. It's a good question. It's asked quite often, and that is, when is the best time to train? In the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening? And it's an easy question to answer, but I think the student was more interested in scratching below the surface and trying to understand perhaps the physiology about when is the best time to train, meaning, again, when is the best time for your body? Perhaps when is your body, right, whatever you're training, the strongest? When do you have the highest capacity for total physical output? Perhaps I didn't ask him that, but I'm generally, when I'm asked that question, if I do kind of ask for an elaboration on it, the question is, well, I can train in the morning or at night, but which is the best for the sort of the outcomes I'm looking for? So if I'm a competitive bodybuilder and I'm trying to increase lean body mass, right? I'm trying to hypertrophy my muscles. Does it make more sense to train when I wake up in the morning? Is there something unique or peculiar or better hormonally? Does my body digest food, or are there more opportunities for protein synthesis in the afternoon versus the evening? And so that's generally what a question like this starts to scratch below the surface to find out. So it's a really good question, but let me start off with the easiest answer to the question and I'm bringing this within the context of personal training, which is the average client that works and has a life, and they're spending 10 hours, 11, 12 hours a day working, family, all of the sort of normal, I guess I can use the word mundane things related to everyday living, right? So in that case, the answer to the question is really easy. The best time to train is when you have time to train. And so that's related to your schedule. Now, again, I've had clients come in and train with me at 5:30 in the morning, 6 a.m., 6:30. Why? Because they got to get to work. Well, does that mean that physiologically it's more beneficial to train at 6 a.m.? The answer is who cares? It didn't matter because that's literally the only time they have to train. And so therefore, that's the best time to train. Because if they don't come in early in the morning before they go to work, they get home from work at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. I've trained clients, very successful clients, who work literally 10, 11, 12-hour days. So even if they were done at 6 in the evening or 7 p.m., just as a for instance, they're wiped. They're finished. They're done. They want to get home. They want to see the family, right? And that makes absolute sense to me. So the answer to the question, when is the best time to train? It's when you have the opportunity to train. So again, for the average client that I've generally trained, that meant that they had one solitary hour and a half in the day. Some of them was in the morning they could do it. For others, they had to be at work early in the morning, and therefore the only time they could do it was after work. And they would, kind of struggle through being exhausted and tired, but at least they were able to get their training in. So that's the easiest answer to the question. Now, on to a more sort of in-depth explanation of what is the best time to train. And this generally comes down to your endocrine system, your hormonal system. And without getting too deep into it, we'll start first off with everybody. Everybody has some differences in how their body responds to the sort of the day, night, the diurnal, nocturnal effects of their hormones. All humans are very similar in how when certain hormones are secreted, at what levels. Again, that is a way too deep introspection on the endocrine system. But for the most part, the general understanding, and I'm saying general understanding because there are many, many studies out there that will tell you you should be awake. You wake up at 6, you should be awake at least 3, perhaps even 4 hours before you do any type of real strenuous exercise. And that's okay. I've read any number of studies, and I'm talking going way back to the 1980s, and all throughout the last couple of decades, just reading over and over all the different ways that the human body can react to different type of training scenarios. I'll give you another example. Is it better to train at 6 in the morning if you're doing your cardio versus your resistance training? And again, the general consensus is if you can, if it doesn't matter, if you don't work or your whatever your lifestyle scenario is, if you can pick and choose, the general consensus is that if you are going to train in the morning, it's probably a good idea to do your cardio training. Why? Because just waking up, your body has not fully adapted to this wakefulness state. Generally, you have these high expressions of cortisol being released, and this is where the 3 to 4 hour sort of ideal scenario comes into play. Ideally, when it comes to maximum muscular effort and output, it's generally going to be 3, 4 hours after you wake up. Now, again, if I wake up at 8 in the morning, that's 12 noon, 1 o'clock. Perhaps that is the best scenario for you. If I wake up at 5, obviously it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. That might be the best scenario from a resistance training or power output strength type of training scenario. If you're going to train immediately, quote, immediately after waking up, again, the general consensus is that it probably makes more sense to do your, if you're going to break up your cardio and resistance training, do your cardio training. But from a purely physiological perspective, when it comes to the ability to generate higher output or physical output levels, in order to be, when you're stronger, you need to be awake generally for a couple of hours, if not longer, before you attempt to do sort of max strength moves. Generally, as the day goes on, again, the general consensus is that as the day goes on, especially into mid to late afternoon, general power output appears to go down. And again, I've seen studies that counter that, go back and forth on it, which is why, again, I don't generally give people options when it comes to which is the best time to train. I will simply say, what are your opportunities to train? Can you train in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening? And if the answer is, I can only train at lunchtime, well, that's what you're going to do. Train at lunchtime. To kind of finalize this question, my recommendation has always been, irrespective of that time that you're training, if you find that you like to train early in the morning or you like to train in the afternoon, my recommendation is try to be consistent with that. In other words, if you got to train at 6 in the morning and you're doing your resistance training, is that ideal physiologically for power output? Probably not. Probably not. But if that's the only time you can do it, do that every day. You'll be surprised. If you train at 6 a.m. every morning, you've only been awake for 30 minutes, an hour, you get a decent warm up in, guess what will happen over a couple of weeks, over a couple of months? Even at a non ideal training time, physiologically, you'll get stronger. Not only will you get stronger, you'll get into better condition depending on your nutrition. Of course, you'll increase your cardiorespiratory output capabilities. Your strength development will go up, and you'll hypertrophy. You probably will. I mean, you got to have the other variables in place. So I hope that makes sense. The idea that when is the best time to train? Well, I'll make it simple. Do cardio early. The idea of doing cardio fasting on an empty stomach still pretty much holds true. It's still a decent way to do it if you're trying to maximize quote fat loss, as long as the other variables in place. And then 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours after you've been awake for right a couple of hours, 3 to 4 hours tends to be a better or more ideal time, at least in my experience. And I'm talking about training higher level athletes. It appeared to be better for them to be awake for 2, 3, or even 4 hours. With that said, irrespective of that time that you're training, once you have found it, the recommendation is be consistent with that on a daily, regular, weekly basis. In other words, don't train at 6 a.m. and then 6 p.m. If that's the only way you can do it, of course, then you got to do it. But if you can, if at all possible, irrespective of those times you're training, try to keep them consistent from workout to workout. I hope this was helpful. At the end of the day, get your workouts in, do something generally every day, 4, 5, 6 days a week, if possible, but always revert back to proper and effective programming, nutrition, hydration, right? All of those other variables. Again, if you have any questions on anything that we just went over in this video, you let us know by writing it in the comment section below as well. If it was helpful and it did make sense to you, write the word understand. If you have not done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If it was worthy, give it the thumbs up and share it with other folks if you would. Have a great week. We will see you next week.